Good morning. Welcome to the Kingsport News Hour. 16th year of Changi, the leap sixth month and the 28th day, right? Today is Thursday. Yes. So 28th day by the heavenly calendar. And Tim Mills is sitting in for the second king of Changi, Kyung Jin. As I mentioned, I think I mentioned yesterday, we will not have a King's Report on Saturday because there is a Holy Day celebration going on beginning at 7 a.m. Japan/Korea time, and that will be 7 a.m. not Taiwan time, but Japan/Korea time. So be aware of that. There is a 1 hour difference there. Okay. Let's do our usual trip around the kingdom, and right now in Chongpyeong, Tennessee, it is 68 degrees to start the day. Mostly clear, high of 84 today, humid with periods of clouds and sunshine, a thunderstorm in spots this afternoon. Tonight, mainly clear, humid, 66 for a low. Father's hometown of Cheongju, North Pyongan Province, Korea, what is today, North Korea. Currently cloudy and 77, high of 75 today, cloudy, warm, and very humid with a thunderstorm in spots this evening, followed by occasional rain and a thunderstorm late. Low of 75 tonight. And then tomorrow, high of 83, cloudy and very humid, couple of mornings, thunderstorms, then afternoon rain, heavy at times. At the Cheonrygung Palace in Northeast Pennsylvania, currently 55 and sunny, high of 71, and tonight a low of 50. Whoa, yeah, that's what I consider ideal weather. Ideal weather, yes. Yes, that's it. Think about that for a minute. Okay, going on, moving on. At the Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground in Limestone County, Texas, currently 72 and partly cloudy. 90 degrees for a high, humid with sunshine and some clouds, and afternoon thunderstorm in spots. And tonight a low of 70, a thunderstorm around this evening, otherwise partly cloudy and humid. At the Palace in South Korea in Suncheon, it is currently 83 and clear. Clear and uncomfortably humid tonight, 75 degrees for a low. And then tomorrow, a morning shower in places, otherwise partly sunny, hot and humid, high of 95. At the Gunma Palaces in Japan, 91 degrees, currently cloudy, and a thunderstorm in spots this evening, otherwise cloudy and humid, low of 76. High of 94 tomorrow, mostly cloudy, hot and humid, shower in spots this afternoon. At Ilan in Taiwan, it is currently 88 degrees and clear, getting down to 77 tonight. Tomorrow, mostly cloudy and hot. Caution advised if outside for extended periods of time. High of 95 tomorrow. Yes, and I think the real feel is going to be over 100 degrees. Okay, let's go to Father's Word. And we are we are in the book on the Pan-Pacific Providence. Let me get some light on this. There we go. Chapter 5. The fruition of all civilizations takes place on the peninsula. That's the chapter heading for chapter 5. And then section 1 is titled Peninsular Civilization and Korea. And then the 1.1 is titled the current of world civilization. And I think I remember the first time I came across this content, I should say, that Father has often stated, actually, and here he's speaking in 1975, but it was actually 1981 when I first came across it, and I had a great deal of difficulty with this. But, well, let's see what you think. Father says, this is not exactly what he was saying in 1981, but it's basically the same thing. The civilizations of ancient human beings began on continents. Okay, well, so far so good, right? Egypt, in the country of Egypt, um, human civilization was born on the banks of the Nile, on the bank of the Nile River, and then this sort of evolved, not evolved, but sort of developed into the peninsular civilization of Greece. And then the Mediterranean civilization sphere was or came about centering on the Italian peninsula. And then that peninsula civilization moved then to the island civilization, and the Atlantic civilization was came to be formed, centering on the island country, England, or yeah, okay, I guess we can say England, as opposed to, or you could say Britain or United Kingdom, or but effectively England. Sorry, Wales. Okay, Scotland, Northern Ireland. Okay, and finally, the island civilization of or Britain crossed the Atlantic, and the miracle of modern civilization was accomplished on the American continent, and then established the Pacific civilization sphere. Okay. All right. So, and Father, as I said, this was done in 1975, but he, let's see here, let's see a little bit later, I see we have a quotation from 1981, but it was at the, I think it was at the professor's Peace Academy video there, Professor's World Peace Academy conference in, I think it was, or was it ICUS? No, it was PWPA, I think, or maybe, yeah, I guess it was ICUS, International Conference on the Unity of Sciences, one or the other. That was held in Seoul in 1981, I believe. And as I was, working on translating Father's words for that, I came across this content, and I really struggled with it. I remember, but Father is speaking in sort of a broad brush strokes, of course, but it is sort of interesting. Anyway, the final conclusion of all that, of course, is that this is all sort of part of the preparation for the Messiah. And you might say, well, what about Jesus then? Jesus was not born on a peninsula. He was actually born on a country that bordered the Mediterranean Sea. So that was the Mediterranean civilization that, well, I guess Father would say, okay, yeah, that was centering on the Italian peninsula. So it was a peninsular civilization, I suppose. Anyway, it's an interesting thing to ponder if you come across it. And if you study Father's words, it's likely that you will come across it at some point. Of course, I was just reading from the Tensongyong, so if you read the Tensongyong, you're certainly going to come across it in this book on the Pan-Pacific Providence. But it is a big part of, a major part of Father's thinking. All right, let's go then to what's going on. And so we were still looking at the situation in Ukraine. And let's start with this story. I have a number of stories on Ukraine today, and we need to do a number of them because no one story is going to give us the best picture. I won't say a complete picture, but we need to do a few stories in order to get a better picture of what's going on. All right, so here we have the Oval Office, and President Trump and Zelensky sitting there. I see Marco Rubio there. Who else do I recognize here? Okay, that's Pete Hegseth, I think, the defense secretary. And this guy in a military combat fatigues, I'm not sure who he is. I don't recognize anybody else. Anyway, let's see here. The Ukraine peace process is moving quite quickly. Don't they teach grammar anymore? Right, all right. Fast and quickly, few and many, lay and lie, of course. 99.9% of people get that one wrong. Anyway, I guess they don't teach grammar anymore. It's part of I think that's part of the communist plot, in my opinion. Okay, moving on. The Ukraine peace process is now moving quite quickly. Thank you. Only 2 months ago, all sides were still locked in positions that gave no chance at all of progress. Russia was demanding complete Ukrainian withdrawal from all of the 4 provinces it claims to have annexed, and a bar on all Western arms supplies to Ukraine, things that neither Ukraine nor Western governments could possibly accept. The Trump administration and the Kyiv and European governments were demanding a prior ceasefire before beginning talks on an agreement, something that Moscow has made clear for months that it would not accept, since Russian advances on the ground are by far the most important leverage that Russia can bring to bear in talks, just as the Ukrainians rejected a ceasefire when they thought they were winning. Of course, major obstacles remain. Of these, the greatest from Ukraine's point of view is probably the continued Russian demand for Ukrainian military withdrawal from the approximately 30% of Donetsk region that Ukraine still holds. It would be appallingly difficult for any Ukrainian government to agree voluntarily to withdraw from this land, given the number of Ukrainian lives sacrificed to hold it and the effort put into fortifying the Ukrainian front line. It seems plausible that the Ukrainian government that agreed to this would be in real danger of being overthrown, unless the Ukrainian army had already been defeated and was in the process of losing the region anyway. It is also necessary to point out, since most Western reporting and analysis have obscured this, that this is one of the few issues in dispute which is actually up to Ukraine to decide. NATO membership, Western security guarantees for Ukraine, and Western arms supplies for Ukraine are all issues for the US and European governments to decide on. Ukraine can ask them to provide these. It cannot decide for them or compel them to do so. Control of the whole Donbass is of considerable symbolic importance to Russia. Barely covert Russian troops fought in support of separatists in the region since 2014. Russian recognition of the region's independence heralded the launch of the Russian invasion of the rest of Ukraine in 2022. Since the early months of the war, Russian observers have been telling me of their view that if Russia could take the whole of the Donbass, that could be enough for Putin to declare victory and end the war. To date, however, while Russia has taken virtually the whole of Lugansk province, around 30% of Donetsk province and 250,000 of its people remain under Ukrainian control. Trump has raised the idea of a swap of this territory for the small areas that Russia holds in Kharkiv and Sumy provinces, which Russia does not claim as its territory. This would, however, mean Ukraine exchanging around 3,000 square miles of territory for 150 square miles, which hardly looks like an equitable deal. After a year in which the Russian army advanced with glacial slowness, in recent weeks it has advanced more rapidly and now seems close to surrounding and capturing the town of Pokrovsk in southern Donetsk. Unless, that is, the Ukrainian army collapses, for Russia to capture the line of heavily defended towns in northern Donetsk will be a very long and bloody business. And even if the Russian army succeeds, the area it takes will be completely devastated. The Trump administration should therefore explore whether US offers of compromise on other issues could get Moscow to abandon its demand for the rest of the Donbass, or reduce it to a much fairer swap of the frontline towns of Pokrovsk and Konstantinovka, which appear close to falling anyway, for occupied land elsewhere. An obvious deal could involve Russia dropping its territorial demand, or rather, like the Ukrainians, deferring the whole issue of legal sovereignty over the 4 provinces for future negotiation, in return for the West giving up the idea of a European reassurance force for Ukraine backed by US air power. This idea is, in any case, foolish. First, if insisted upon in negotiations, it is likely to make a peace settlement impossible. When Trump raised it during the talks in Washington, the Russian Foreign Ministry responded thusly: "We affirm our repeatedly stated position on our categorical rejection of any scenarios that envisage the appearance in Ukraine of a military contingent with the participation of NATO countries, which is fraught with an uncontrolled escalation of the conflict with unpredictable consequences." So let's see here. Let me back up here, make sure we're understanding this. Dropping its territorial demand, okay, in return for the West giving up the idea of a European reassurance force for Ukraine backed by US air power. This idea is, in any case, foolish. This idea is, in any case, foolish. What idea are we talking about here? The security guarantee, the reassurance force. Okay. Right. So not the security. This is not the security guarantee. This is the actual presence of European troops in Ukraine, a European reassurance force for Ukraine backed by US air powers. Yeah, so I see. Okay, so this is separate from the security guarantee that Trump has been talking about. Okay. Here we're talking about European troops in Ukraine, and that, of course, is foolish. Of course, yes, it is likely to make a peace settlement impossible, because the Russian Foreign Ministry has made it very clear that that the appearance in Ukraine of a military contingent with the participation of NATO countries this is something they categorical rejection. They categorically reject this idea of military contingents with the participation of NATO countries, because that is fraught with uncontrolled escalation of the conflict with unpredictable consequences. They're saying that, yeah, that's going to lead to a war between Russia and NATO, and that's not good. They don't want to go that way. Don't blame them, because they would lose that kind of a war very quickly. Secondly, any such force, okay, we're talking about the European force in Ukraine now. I don't think I thought this had sort of gone by the wayside, but I guess they're still talking about it. Would obviously run the risk of becoming embroiled in a direct war with Russia, something that almost every NATO government, including the Biden administration, has rejected. U.S. air cover for this force would then draw in the United States, raising the real possibility of nuclear cataclysm. Yes, that is true. That is true. So, what are we doing here? Okay, I think we start here. Okay. European insistence on this force also reveals either the deep hypocrisy or the utter confusion of European thinking. Okay. Yes, okay. That's not news. European thinking does tend to be utterly confused. Okay. I know some of you are watching from the UK and Europe, and I'm not saying anything about your thinking. Of course, you're very clear thinking, but the heads of your government tend to be utterly confused from time to time, more than time to time. For we have heard repeatedly, moving on before I get myself into any more trouble, for we have heard repeatedly from European establishments that they need massively to rearm, because within the foreseeable future, Russia may test NATO by invading and occupying part of the Baltic states, which are NATO members. It is not, though, completely obvious that if NATO troops are deployed to Ukraine, then that is the place in which the Russians would test NATO. Is it not obvious? Okay. Is it not obvious, though? Completely obvious that if NATO troops are deployed to Ukraine, that is the place in which the Russians would, quote, test, unquote, NATO. And since Ukraine is not a NATO member, they could do so at far lower risk to themselves. There are also other areas in which the US could offer concessions to Russia in return for dropping the territorial demand, areas, moreover, in which would do no harm to Ukraine. One would obviously be the suspension of all Western sanctions against Russia, though with a snapback clause stating that they would automatically resume if Russia launched a new aggression. At the moment, the Europeans are only offering to lift sanctions at some unspecified point in the future if Russia abides by the terms of an unspecified agreement, a wholly inadequate basis for serious compromise. Okay. The US, for its part, can also offer sanctions relief, new arms limitation talks. This is what we talked about previously about the what is it, INF, was it? The Intermediate Nuclear Forces and the New START Treaty and stuff like that. In other words, we're talking about arms limitation, the strategic arms limitations, right? And above all, a treaty whereby both NATO and the Russian-dominated Collective Security Treaty Organization promise not to further expand their membership. Ukraine cannot agree to reduce its armed forces, but it can and should guarantee the linguistic and cultural rights of the Russian-speaking minority in Ukraine. After all, Sweden colonized Finland for several centuries, but Swedish is an official language in Finland. Okay, I didn't know that. That's interesting. It is, of course, impossible to guarantee that either Russia or the Europeans would accept a peace agreement along these lines. They would be extremely foolish not to do so, but God knows we have seen enough examples of outrageous folly on all sides since the Ukrainian crisis began in 2013. The critical role of the US in providing arms and intelligence to Ukraine, even if paid for by the Europeans, does, however, give Washington a great deal of leverage. Such a deal should be proposed first to the Russians. If they rejected it, then full US arms supplies and sanctions should continue, most likely condemning the Russian army to years more of very slow and costly advance through ruined lands. If Russia accepted the Ukrainians and Europeans rejected, then that should be the end of US aid to Ukraine and any support for European engagement. Europe itself would benefit enormously from a peace deal along these lines. All that existing European establishments would suffer would be a blow to their pride. Well, that's pretty big, as a result of being sidelined by Washington. Not that there's anything new in that. And forced to withdraw their previous preening rhetoric and empty promises. On that score, they might, however, want to read a poem from a previous European catastrophe by the British poet Captain Wilfred Owen, killed in action in November 1918, The Parable of the Old Man and the Young. It retells the story of Abraham and Isaac with a different, bitter ending. Let's read this. Then Abram bound the youth with belts and straps and builded parapets and trenches there, and stretched forth the knife to slay his son, when lo, an angel called him out of heaven, saying, Lay not thy hand upon the lad, neither do anything to him. Behold, a ram caught in a thicket by its horns. Offer the ram of pride instead of him. But the old man would not do so, but slew his son. Interesting. The parable of the old man and the young. It retells the story of Abraham and Isaac with a different and bitter ending. Yes. Okay, and I guess that's the end of that story. All right. So let's go to another one, a different one here. Let's see here. Okay, let's go to this one. I'm sorry I'm taking these from the MSN. I know that's a leftist site, and maybe some of you are scandalized by that, but you know, I take stories where I can find them, and if they're leftist, then we expose them as leftist. Oh, I touched my camera again. That's working. So here, Russia's main goal in the war against Ukraine is to establish political control over the entire country, not just to occupy certain regions such as Donetsk, the Institute for the Study of War reports. analysts examined a statement by Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in an interview on August 19th. Lavrov is the guy that wore the T-shirt to Alaska that said CCCP, or which is, the Russian abbreviation for USSR. So, you got to wonder, and he's supposed to be a diplomat, right? Lavrov claimed that Moscow never talked about the need to seize any territories, including Crimea and Donbass. At the same time, Lavrov put forward demands that effectively deny Ukraine's sovereignty, in particular, the repeal of laws on language and religion. Well, this is what the previous article was saying, that the Russian population in Ukraine should be guaranteed their rights as a Russian minority. In other words, so the Russian language and also the Orthodox religion. Ukraine is Catholic. In other words, its loyalty is to Rome. So this is in one sense, this is a religious war as well. Between the Rome-centered Catholic Church and the Moscow-centered Orthodox Church. ISW analysts stress that such statements reflect the Kremlin's true goals to remove Ukraine's democratically elected government and replace it with a pro-Russian one in order to gain full political control over the country. But I think that a guarantee for the Russian population to be able to to use their language and to worship their religion, I think is entirely reasonable, I think, in my opinion. So I don't know how this author says that shows that they want to take over the entire country. Considering Russia's territorial demands separately from demands concealed by its references to root causes obscures the reality that Kremlin views its war demands as indivisible. The Kremlin aims to accomplish all of these goals and has shown no willingness to compromise any of them or sacrifice some for others to facilitate or complete a peace process, the report states. According to the analysts, the Kremlin seeks Ukraine's demilitarization, a ban on NATO membership, a change of government, and is prepared to pursue these aims through both military and diplomatic means. Yes. Well, a ban on NATO membership, yes. Ukraine's demilitarization, I don't think that's really on the table right now. That may be something that the Kremlin will demand in the future. And a change of government, I think also, I don't think that's at least not overtly demanding that. Okay. Prepared to pursue these aims, both military and diplomatic means. And that may be true, that they may say, okay, we'll agree to a peace thing now, but then that'll just give us time, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years to rearm ourselves and rebuild our military, and then we'll go after these other goals. That's possible. But you deal with the situation as it is now. Right now, we want to stop the killing, stop the dying, as President Trump is saying. Ultimately, the Kremlin launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022 after 8 years of failed attempts to bring the country back under its control through hybrid military campaigns dating back to 2004. ISW notes that Russia similarly seeks to expand its control over other former Soviet states, including NATO members Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. And NATO already, or the U.S. troops, I think, are already stationed in these countries. I believe. I think that's correct. But anyway, NATO troops are definitely stationed in those countries. So if Russia wanted to take those countries, that would mean war with the United States, and at least in the near term, I'm pretty sure they're not going for that. Are U.S. troops in the Baltic states? Okay. Yes, there are U.S. troops stationed in the Baltic states as a part of NATO's enhanced forward presence. These troops are primarily there to enhance regional security and to deter potential adversaries. Gee, I wonder who that would be. Finland? Maybe not. Okay. All right. Um, let's see. In addition to the EFP, the U.S. has maintained a persistent rotational presence in Lithuania since 2019. Okay, so yes, there are U.S. troops in the Baltic states. So I'm sure Russia will see this if they play the long game. Then 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, they may try to take over the Baltic states, but I don't think that's going to happen right now at all. So far, its efforts to establish influence in the Baltic states have failed. At the same time, the Kremlin has achieved far greater success in Belarus and Georgia, and is now working to strengthen its grip on Minsk. Minsk is the capital of Belarus, in order to fully erase the notion of Belarusian independence. Belarus has always been close to Russia, hasn't it? I'm not. When I say always, I'm talking about going back to the fall of the USSR in 1991. Um, Belarus, I think maybe was the last to go. I think, or one of the last to go. Earlier, Russian leader Vladimir Putin presented a list of demands to end the war against Ukraine during his meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump in Alaska. These demands included not only territorial concessions. Reuters reported that Russia may agree to withdraw from part of the occupied Ukrainian territories, including areas of the Kharkiv and Sumy regions, while Ukraine would allegedly have to give up some eastern lands that Moscow failed to capture. And we talked about that, right? Meanwhile, President Zelensky, during talks with Trump, did not dismiss the idea of a possible territorial exchange. However, Zelensky emphasized that such decisions cannot be made without taking into account the will of the Ukrainian people. Yeah, so if you were to put this to a vote, I'm sure the Ukrainian people would vote against it. So he's basically effectively saying no, but he said, oh, I got to talk to my people about that. Let's see here. And then let's get rid of that one. Let's see here. And then let's look at this one. Zelensky urges quick progress on security guarantees, saying possible Putin summit site is challenging. I think they're talking about having it in Hungary, I think, is it? Anyway, let's go through this, see what they're going to. Ukraine has said it expects rapid progress on the security guarantees its allies could provide in a peace deal with Russia, but that one of the possible summit sites being pursued by the United States would be challenging. Well, that's a no, isn't it? Okay. Ukrainian President Zelensky urged swift progress as military officials from the US and Europe meet. Ukraine wanted to have an understanding of the security guarantees architecture within 7 to 10 days, Zelensky said on Wednesday. After Russia launched one of its biggest aerial attacks of the year overnight, he said Thursday that there was still no signal from Moscow that they truly intend to engage in substantive negotiations and end this war. Trump promised European leaders that the U.S. would help provide security guarantees in any settlement with Russia, a key concern for Kiev. He has since made clear that this would not include U.S. troops on the ground, but might involve air support. Okay, so where is this challenging Russian site? Or Budapest, that's what I thought, okay, Budapest. So they're talking about Budapest and Geneva. Yeah, but Zelensky does not like Budapest. Okay. Because of Viktor Orban's close ties with the Kremlin. Switzerland and Austria, he said, are okay. And also Turkey. There have been talks going on in Istanbul and Turkey, so yeah, he would agree to that. And Russia on Wednesday signaled it was in no hurry for Putin and Zelensky to sit down together. When it comes to meetings at the highest level, they must be prepared with the utmost care. So they're for one thing, they're playing for time, right? They want to have more time to take more territory. Adding to this apparent lack of urgency in talks, Russia launched a massive aerial bombardment overnight that included nearly 600 drones and 40 missiles, Ukraine's Air Force said early Thursday. It's early this morning, right? The strikes reached deep inside Ukraine, hitting an American business in the western region of Zakarpattia, Zelensky said, and injuring at least 15 employees. At least one person was killed and two others were injured in Lviv, that's also in the west, as dozens of residential buildings were destroyed, the governor of that area said. The Russians carried out this attack as if nothing has changed at all, as if there are no global efforts to stop this war, Zelensky said. This requires a response. So clearly, yeah, I mean, Russia is trying to increase its advantage before any sort of peace talks begin. And that's not unusual. It's terrible, it's despicable, but not unusual. That's how the world works. Okay. Right. So I think that's all we have on the Ukraine situation this morning. Yeah. Okay. Uh, let's okay, let's go to China since we're always looking for China news. And here, Reuters has an exclusive thing today, and this is just a couple of hours old, I think. Yeah, about a couple hours old. China considering yuan-backed stablecoins to boost global currency usage, sources say. This is interesting to me because, of course, China wants to challenge the dollar. It wants its currency to become a global currency. And so, for example, they successfully lobbied the IMF to include um, the Chinese yuan, their own currency, in the as a major currency, and I think it's included in the special drawing rights. Special drawing rights are basically a basket of currencies. I think it's 5 currencies, I believe: dollar, pound, yen, euro, and yes, and the Chinese currency, the renminbi. Those 5 currencies are sort of put into a basket. And even though the Chinese currency, of course, its weight is very, very little, but they wanted that sort of as a kind of a prestige thing. And this happened many years back, well, maybe 10, 20, maybe 10 or 20 years back, that they managed to get the IMF to do that for them. But the problem with the China is that they're not able to get rid of capital controls, and capital controls are common in less developed countries, and the purpose they serve is that they keep the um, they keep the citizens of that country, or maybe foreigners too, from taking that country's currency out into the world, and because then that would sort of weaken the economy. Now, the U.S., for example, in the United States, dollars are going out of the United States all the time. In fact, because the United States has a trade deficit, dollars are always going out of the United States, and that fact alone is not a problem for the U.S. The U.S. does not have capital controls, at least not very many capital controls. Not exactly zero, but they, see, I'm having trouble with my anyway. Okay. I'm going to ignore the situation with the camera for now. Okay. All right. Capital controls. So now China is kind of, I think, overextending itself. And this is interesting to me. Let me see if I can. Okay, that's what I was afraid of. Okay. Okay. Try to fix this situation. Okay. Come on now. So China is, I think, maybe overextending itself, and that's interesting to me because when the USSR fell, one of the reasons was President Reagan's SDI, the Strategic Defense Initiative, if you remember that. The media referred to it as the Star Wars thing, where, anyway, it was basically President Reagan taking the arms race with the USSR to the next level. And basically, the Soviet economy could not support that, and it crashed, and the rest is history, basically. So perhaps now China, and you'll see in the article that they're trying to match what the U.S. is doing with stablecoins, and they see that the U.S. stablecoin is probably going to support the dollar's dominance in the world. And so they want to say, well, you know what, let's challenge that. Let's have our own stable coins so that we can, so that our currency can dominate in the world. But because they don't have the economy to back it up in the way that the US does, just as the Soviet Union did not have the economy to back up its challenge to President Reagan's arms race, SDI, it could be that this could spell the end of the Chinese economy and therefore the Chinese Communist Party regime. Wishful thinking, I know. I know, wishful thinking. But sometimes wishes come true. So let's see what's going on here. This is a Reuters exclusive, they say, okay. Let's see, key points. Okay. China is considering allowing the usage of yuan-backed stablecoins for the first time to boost wider adoption. Let me expand this. Allow the usage of yuan-backed stablecoins for the first time to boost wider adoption of its currency globally, sources familiar with the matter said, in a major reversal of its stance towards digital assets. Right. The State Council, or China's cabinet, will review and possibly approve a roadmap later this month for a greater usage of the currency globally, including catching up with the U.S. push on stablecoins. So you see, they're trying to catch up to the U.S., just like the Soviet Union tried to catch up to the U.S. and wound up collapsing as a result. Catching up with the U.S. push on stablecoins, said the sources. The plan is expected to include targets for usage of the Chinese currency in the global markets and outline the responsibilities of domestic regulators, they said, adding that the roadmap will also include guidelines for risk prevention. risk prevention. The country's senior leadership is also expected to meet for a study session as early as the end of this month, focusing on yuan internationalization and stablecoins, which are gaining momentum worldwide, said one of the sources. In that meeting, senior leaders are likely to deliver remarks to set the tone for stablecoins and define the boundaries of its application and development in business, said the source. China's plan for the usage of stablecoins, if approved, would mark a major shift in its approach towards digital assets. The country banned cryptocurrency trading and mining in 2021 due to concerns about the stability of the financial system. But, of course, today, China is actually a major source of Bitcoin mining. So go figure. Somebody's doing it, probably the Communist Party. Okay. They banned it, and yet today they're one of the major sources of Bitcoin mining. China has long aspired to the yuan to achieve global currency status akin to the dollar or euro, reflecting its weight as the world's second biggest economy. However, its tight capital controls and its trillion-dollar annual trade surpluses have worked against that aim. Because of the surpluses, what happens with a surplus? It means that other countries' currencies are coming into the country, because surplus means that you're selling more than you're buying, right? You're selling more than you're buying. And so when you sell, of course, the other guy's currency comes into your pocket. When you buy, your currency goes out of your pocket. But if you have a surplus, that means that your money is not going out into the world. Those restrictions are likely to be a key hurdle in the development of stablecoins as well, market participants have said. Yes, key hurdle, I think, is the operative phrase in this entire article. Stablecoins are a type of cryptocurrency designed to maintain a constant value. And this is Reuters. This is Reuters, all right. This is Reuters. And they know that's not true. They know that's not true. Constant value relative to, okay, relative to the asset that backs the stablecoin. For example, a dollar-backed stablecoin will maintain a constant value relative to the dollar, but the dollar itself is losing value. We know that, right? We know that. Inflation means that the money is losing value. That's what inflation is. They say, what is it now, 3 point something percent, but we know that that's not true. It's more than that. And so they keep saying stable coins maintain a constant value. Okay. All right. Well, Reuters. This is the propaganda of the folks who are riding the white horse of the apocalypse, right? You know what that is, right? That's the Rothschilds and the IMF and the Bank for International Settlements and all the Fed and all the central banks around the world. This is their propaganda, and we're supposed to believe it. They are usually pegged to a fiat currency such as the US dollar and are commonly used by crypto traders to move funds between tokens. Okay. The yuan's share as a global payment currency fell to 2.88% in June, its lowest in 2 years. Okay. In contrast, the US dollar commanded a 47.19% market share, which is down, I know, but it's still, compared to the Chinese currency, is still incredibly high. China places strong capital controls to manage flows in and out of the border, with a few connect schemes permitting capital to be deployed in some key offshore markets, such as Hong Kong. In the US, President Donald Trump backed stablecoins days after his inauguration in January and is establishing a regulatory framework that helps legitimize dollar-pegged cryptocurrencies. And President Trump wants this because, for one thing, when stablecoins are issued, such as, well, the biggest one right now is Tether, then for every dollar that the Tether company issues, they buy a U.S. Treasury bond. Usually, sometimes they have other things like Bitcoin too, but for the most part, they're buying U.S. Treasuries. And so right now, fewer and fewer people want to buy U.S. Treasuries. So now this is a new source of demand for U.S. Treasuries. So that's one reason. And the other reason is that it makes it easier for people to get a hold of, basically, of dollars. So it means that the dollar dominance in the world will continue. So that's why President Reagan seems to be interested in the stable coins that are dollar pegged. Their underlying blockchain technology enables instant, borderless, and round-the-clock transfer of funds at low cost, giving stablecoins the potential to disrupt traditional daily money moves and cross-border payment systems. So, when I bring money from the United States to Korea, I have to pay $25. Whereas if I were to do a stablecoin, it would probably be something less than $1, I think. It depends on it depends on it's not constant, but around $1 or so usually, but certainly a lot less than $25. So this would be a challenge to who? To banks. To banks, right? So who in the US Senate is always pounding the table trying to defend the banking system in America? Well, it's the leftist communist Elizabeth Warren. Go figure, right? A communist who loves banks, Elizabeth Warren. Well, she is basically a communist. So, and of course, why is she doing that? Well, because I'm sure they support her. I'm sure they provide her with a lot of political donations. All right, so that's the way it goes. Financial innovations, specifically stablecoins, is viewed by Beijing as a promising tool for yuan internationalization amid the growing influence of US dollar-linked cryptocurrencies in global finance, said the sources. So they're trying to keep pace or catch up with the United States. They've got a long ways to go, right? What is it, 2.88 to 47.19? Yeah, so they've got a long ways to go. Details of the plan are expected to be unveiled in the coming weeks, with Chinese regulators, including the Central Bank, the People's Bank of China, being assigned implementation duties, said the sources. The sources declined to be named as they were not authorized to speak. The State Council did not immediately comment. Okay. Stablecoins backed by the US dollar currently dominate the market, accounting for over 99% of the global stablecoin supply, according to the Bank for International Settlements. And the European Central Bank has also, I think, put out a stable coin, I believe. In Asia, South Korea has pledged to allow companies to introduce won-based stablecoins and develop the necessary infrastructure, while similar initiatives are underway in Japan. The latest push comes amid mounting geopolitical tensions with Washington and the growing use of dollar-backed stablecoins by Chinese exporters. Beijing's latest plans come after a Shanghai regulator last month said it had held a meeting for local government officials to consider strategic responses to stablecoins and digital currencies. In a recent interview, People's Bank of China advisor told local media that an offshore yuan stablecoin in Hong Kong is a possibility. Separately, Hong Kong's long-awaited stablecoin ordinance took effect on August 1 and positions the Chinese-controlled territory as one of the first markets globally to regulate fiat-backed stablecoin issuers. China's commercial hub, Shanghai, is also establishing an international operations center for the digital yuan. According to the sources, Hong Kong and Shanghai will be the main cities to fast-track local implementation of the latest plan. China is expected to discuss expanding the use of yuan and possibly stablecoins for cross-border trade and payments with some countries at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit to be held August 31 and September 1 in Tianjin, said these sources. Okay. The global stablecoin market is currently small at about $247 billion, according to a crypto data provider, CoinGecko. However, Standard Chartered Bank estimates it could grow to $2 trillion by 2028. So we'll see. But maybe that China is going maybe a step too far, and this could be their downfall. We can hope. We can hope. We can hope. We can hope. Okay. Because freedom is contradictory to communism. This is and stablecoins do represent greater freedom because it's easier to move capital around the world. You can do it at night. You can do it on weekends, right? And like when I move money from the U.S. to Korea, I will put in the order, and the money doesn't actually move for several hours. And the people have to come to work for one thing. They have to come to work in, I don't know, whereas New York or San Francisco or wherever. And then they say, "Oh, look, we got another order from this guy in Korea." Well, all right, maybe it's but really, they only move my money during business hours, their business hours, not my business hours, but their business hours. But with stablecoins, it's 24/7. And so that also, I think, makes it attractive to businesses. It's cheaper, it's faster, and you can do it at night and on weekends and whenever you want, and so forth. So we'll see how this develops. But certainly, stablecoins in general are going to become more and more a part of our lives. Even if we're not moving money around countries, but even within domestically, I suspect that stablecoins will be used by banks more and more to move funds. So we'll see how this all works out. Okay. Now let's go to this one. Okay. Now this may be just a knucklehead who wasn't really thinking straight. But I don't know. And is this an exception? Man in California jailed after shipping weapons to North Korea for a surprise attack against South Korea. Okay. And let's take a look at this. Is of course the guy. That's from his Instagram. A Chinese national living in California. So this is a Chinese national living in California. All right. So we've heard about Chinese people coming into the United States illegally. I don't know if he was one of them, but it's possible. Has been sentenced to 8 years behind bars for shipping weapons and ammunition to North Korea, which he admitted were intended for a surprise attack on South Korea. So Shen Guowen is a Chinese national who entered the United States in 2012 on a student visa and remained in the U.S. Living in Ontario, California, after it expired in December 2023. Okay, so I guess now he was living in Canada, I guess. At the direction of the North Korean government, officials Wynn exported firearms, ammunition, and other military items to North Korea by concealing them inside shipping containers that departed from the port of Long Beach. That's in California. North Korean officials wired him $2 million for his efforts, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office, Central District of California. It comes as a North Korean threat sparks huge U.S. and South Korean military team up. They've been doing some exercises recently. Wynn was arrested December 2024 and pleaded guilty on June 9th to one count of conspiracy to violate the International Emergency Economic Powers Act and one count of acting as an illegal agent of a foreign government. He didn't register himself as an agent for North Korea. He told investigators that before entering the U.S., he met with North Korean government officials at the country's embassy in China. So this was a premeditated thing. He had a plan. They directed him to procure goods on behalf of North Korea, the U.S. Attorney's Office said. Now, he's a Chinese citizen, but I wonder if he's actually Korean descent. Of course, this is a Chinese name, but that could be the Chinese pronunciation of his name. Could be a Chinese of Korean descent. Otherwise, why would he become involved in this? Wynn was contacted via an online messaging platform by two North Korean government officials who instructed him to buy and smuggle firearms and other goods, including sensitive technology from the U.S. to North Korea via China. The following year, Wynn shipped at least 3 containers of firearms out of the port of Long Beach to China en route to their ultimate destination in North Korea. He attempted to conceal the illegal shipments by filing false export information, lying about the contents of the containers. Wow, imagine that. Okay. And these are the weapons that he apparently shipped. Just one rifle, it looks like. And we got the magazine there. What are these? Okay, it looks like a handgun over here. Is that a handgun? Yeah, it looks like a handgun over there. I don't know what that is. Some sort of case. Okay. In May 2023, Wynn purchased a firearm business in Houston. He paid for it using money sent through intermediaries by one of Wynn's North Korean contacts. Many of the firearms he sent to North Korea were purchased by Wynn in Texas before he drove them to California, where he arranged for them to be shipped. In December 2023, Wynn sent one shipment which he falsely claimed to U.S. officials containing a refrigerator. It arrived in Hong Kong in January 2024 and was later transported to Nampo, North Korea. Nampo is the port that's nearest to Pyongyang. Then in September 2024, Wynn brought approximately 60,000 rounds of 9mm ammunition intended to ship to North Korea. At the instruction of North Korean officials, he also obtained a sensitive technology, including a chemical threat identification device and a handheld broadband receiver that detects known, unknown, illegal, disruptive, or interfering transmissions. In the plea agreement, when admitted that he knew it was illegal to ship firearms. He further confessed that he had been acting at the direction of North Korean government officials and had not fulfilled the legal requirement to notify the Attorney General that he was acting under direction and control. So they caught this one. I wonder how many others have done something similar. I'm sure he's not the only one that was involved in this kind of trade. Well, let's hope the FBI can catch these guys. All right, thank you. Let's see, today, yes, and so I'm traveling beginning tomorrow morning, but I should be in my hotel by tomorrow evening. So I will see you then, if all goes well. God bless, Godspeed. May His kingdom come quickly.